Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm Matthew DeSantis, and this is the Win, Place, Show podcast, which is devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping, and we are thrilled to be a part of the Amalfi Media Network. Today, we're going to be covering 3 Breeders' Cup win and you're in races on the Sunday card at Keeneland that features the Grade 1 Spinster Stakes with the always impressive and amazing Latruska. But before we get to that, I just want to give you a quick reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Place Show on the podcast platform of your choice. And remember that we'll have a podcast-only episode on Monday where I recap the weekend and go over what I got right, what I got wrong, and a few lessons learned as we head in to Breeders' Cup season. Remember that we have horse racing content for any preferred consumption platform. If you enjoy listening, we have the podcast. If you enjoy watching videos, we have the Win Place Show YouTube channel. And I have to say, I'm thrilled that so many of you have been discovering the YouTube channel as well. I was afraid that when we started the podcast that people would just gravitate away from the YouTube show, but we're actually attracting more and more people to the YouTube channel, so I'm thrilled to see that. And if you prefer reading, well, that's okay, because we always have blogs that correspond with each of these episodes where I give you my win, place, show picks for the entire card, not just the graded stakes. Now, the best place to get all of that is to head over to amalfimedia.com and follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Remember, those blogs are great for also getting your stables ready for stable dual fantasy contests, and I include the fantasy stable prices next to all of my picks. And while this weekend I've been focusing exclusively on Keeneland for the podcast and the YouTube previews, if you follow me on Twitter at FailedToMenace, I'll be posting short 2-minute preview videos for Santa Anita where I give you some stable dual advice if you're interested in entering those contests over the weekend. Finally, make sure to interact with us on Twitter and YouTube to let me know how you think the races are going to break down. Give me your point of view and your opinion on this, and share with your fellow horse racing fanatics. Okay, well, let's move in and talk about these 3 stakes races, these 3 Breeders' Cup win and you're in races. And the first one is the Indian Summer Stakes, and this is a little bit of an anomaly because it's not a graded stakes race, but it is a Breeders' Cup win and you're in race, and that has a lot to do with the fact that it's a 2-year-old race, and so this is for the juveniles. But let's dive right in and talk about that race, and let's go over the field for the Indian Summer Stakes, and that is 5.5 furlongs on turf for 2-year-olds. This is a 10-horse field, and some really nice horses in here, actually. Starting with the number 1 horse, Sunny Is Not So Funny, which I think is a great name, trained by Mike Maker and jockeyed by Luis Saez. Then Coffee Maker, trained by Wesley Ward, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. Detroit City, a long shot, trained by Jack Sisterston and jockeyed by Adam Bashiza. Pure Panic, another Mike Miller horse, jockeyed by Flavian Pratt. Big Boss Ben, horse we're going to talk a little bit about, trained by John Alexander Ortiz and jockeyed by Raylu Gutierrez. Bonus Appreciation, a Steve Asmussen horse, jockeyed by Brian Hernandez Jr. Then Morning Line Favorite, Averly Jane, another Wesley Ward horse, jockeyed by Tyler Gaffleone. Roman Poet, Tom Amos, trained, Florent Giroux jockeyed. Circleback Jack, Sarah Hamilton horse, jockeyed by Robbie Alvarado. And then finally in the 10-hole Diamond City, trained by Mark Cassie and jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. So, how do we want to start talking about this 2-year-old race? And I just, there are some people who don't really like handicapping 2-year-old races because, especially before you get to the Breeders' Cup, because a lot of these horses have 1, maybe 2, at most 3 races under their belt. And so it's hard to get a sense of what their running styles are, how they're going to mature, how they're going to progress. A lot of 2-year-old handicapping is about projection. It's about looking at pedigrees. It's about trusting certain trainers in some cases, trusting certain jockeys. It can be difficult. It can be particularly difficult in this field because this is a turf race, as I mentioned. And yet, I would say two of the biggest favorites have never actually run on turf, which, uh, it's kind of fascinating. And it's not from that they didn't want to, but they've had several turf races that have been washed off the surface. When it gets too wet and saturated, they'll move turf racing for the safety of the horse off of the turf and onto dirt. So there are several horses in this field who have wanted to run on turf, but have just not had the opportunity to do so yet. And so this is now the first time doing it. One of those horses is morning line favorite Averly Jane, who has just been dominant in 3 starts, but as I mentioned, has not yet run on turf. Wanted to get on turf at the Skidmore Stakes, but that was taken off. And, he performed beautifully because he turned around and still won that race by 9 lengths on the dirt. So, very impressive effort. Clearly, they feel this is a horse that has a future on turf. They tried to get it in the Skidmore Stakes, obviously, and they've been training this horse consistently on the turf since that time. So they clearly like this horse on turf. Wesley Ward has a pretty high winning percentage and knows what he's doing when it comes to turf horses. So, Averly Jane at 4-5 is the overwhelming favorite, but I would say is the overwhelming favorite for a reason. Has posted the best buyer speed figures in the field by a pretty considerable margin, and just seems to keep getting better. Again, you're looking at a horse that posted an 86 buyer speed number last time out at 5.5 furlongs. So it definitely has the speed, can easily win, and it's hard to move away from in that favorite position. So that's just the one horse. Now there's another horse that I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about, which is Sunny Is Not So Funny. And it's not just because I like the name, but this is a horse that has only run on dirt, but has posted a 78 buyer speed figure in his maiden and won that with ease. So this is a horse only going into its second career race. Like I said, the first one was on dirt. Now we're moving to turf, but the performance there was pretty incredible. The horse does not have a pedigree that screams turf. Some horses, you can look through both the dam and the sire, and you can kind of see some success with turf, or the offspring of certain dam and sires have had success in turf. You don't really see that with Sunny Is Not So Funny. The siblings have not really done particularly much on turf, so we'll see. Mike Maker is a pretty accomplished trainer, knows what he's doing. Clearly seems to think this is a spot where the horse has a chance. And this might be an instance too where maybe the horse doesn't necessarily have a future on turf, but clearly has a lot of talent, and maybe it's just fast enough to blitz the field and is fast enough to end up winning this race, despite maybe not having a turf pedigree long term. So we'll see. But at 5-1, Sunny Is Not So Funny offers a little bit of value and a little bit of a chance to go there. Now, a horse that's going off at 7-2 is Coffee Maker. And this is a fascinating horse in that Wesley Ward thought so much of this horse. He already took him over to Ascot, which typically, this is a horse that started in the United States. This is an American horse. Started in the United States, ran one race, and then went over to Ascot. I mean, you rarely see that for 2-year-olds, where they go over to England and run against the best. And ended up coming in 8th in a very large field. That's another thing that if you don't follow European racing, the fields are typically massive over there. It's not uncommon to have a 20 or 21 horse race. We might see that in the Kentucky Derby in the United States. We typically don't see that just about anywhere else. That's pretty commonplace over there. So, finished 8th, but was really pretty close to the lead. And so it was, kind of, it didn't do great down the stretch. I think 5.5 furlongs is actually a better distance for Coffee Maker, both at Ascot, and then he came back and ran one additional race, came in third, kind of, again, tired down the stretch at 6.5 furlongs. So I think cutting back to 5.5 furlongs is the right move here. Certainly, this is a horse, though, that has tested itself. I mean, it has gone up against really good competition abroad, came back and ran in a really big non-graded stakes race at Kentucky Downs, nearly $500,000 purse. So this is a horse that has gone up against some very good 2-year-old competition, has held his own, and I think is a horse that may be pretty reliable moving forward. I don't know if I love this horse necessarily in this race. I think this horse has a chance of just missing the board, like hitting fourth, hitting fifth in this particular race. I think it's going to be pretty close as well. I could see this horse being fourth or fifth and 2 lengths off the winner. But Coffee Maker, very good horse. You're not getting huge odds there at 7-2, and so that's part of the reason I don't love the odds at 7-2 for a horse that I think is very good, but maybe not a favorite to win. So those are some of the horses that I have my eye on to win and to kind of hit the board pretty high. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about 2 horses that I think provide some value, and they're 2 long shots. And the first is Bonus Appreciation, who's going off at 12-1. This is a Steve Asmussen horse, and Bonus Appreciation keeps improving. Had a pretty unimpressive and uninspiring start. Tried to run 2 straight races then on turf. Both of them got washed off. Had to run on dirt. Finally got on turf last time out at Kentucky Downs and ran a 67 Beyer speed figure, which is pretty good in comparison to the rest of the field. But showed improvement under Brian Hernandez Jr., who's going to be jockeying him again this time. And like I said, finished fourth, but only 3 lengths off the lead. I think this is a horse that could keep getting better. And part of the reason I say that is because Steve Asmussen's horses tend to run into shape a little bit. And a horse like Gunnet, for instance, another one of his 2-year-olds, has raced a lot. And more importantly, has got better the more he raced. I have a feeling Bonus Appreciation might be the same way, that the more this horse runs, the better it's going to get. And now that you have it consistently going to be on turf, 12-1, I mean, that's not a bad odds. I like those. I like the value there. So certainly a horse to consider maybe at the back end of your exotic bets. I don't know if I like Bonus Appreciation to win, but I do think that the horse has maybe a better than average chance to hit the board. Now, let me give you a real long shot, and one that I'm actually really high on, which is Big Boss Ben. Big Boss Ben is going off at 30-1, and I love this horse. I like throwing a dart at this horse, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the past performances, this horse really stunk it up the last time out at Colonial Downs. 5.5 furlongs on turf was the betting line favorite and promptly finished 6th, like a mile behind. Okay. But here's the thing. And this is where talking to people who are in the industry can be really helpful. And if you've been following me from the beginning, you know that I interviewed Jessica Paquette, who we're sending well wishes to. She had a riding accident the other day, and she's on the mend at home. And so we're sending out certainly all of our thoughts to Jessica and hoping she recovers quickly. But when she was on the podcast, and she's the on-air analyst at Colonial Downs and does a lot of handicapping and covered Colonial the entire season, when I had her on the podcast and talked to her about Colonial Downs, she said Colonial has a unique turf surface that some horses really respond well to, but there are also very traditional turf horses who may not respond well to it. Specifically, she said you typically look for a bigger bodied horse to do well at Colonial. And I think this was an instance of Big Boss Ben simply not being a great fit for the turf at Colonial. And I think that's, kind of one of the issues that you face there. And so that's why I feel very comfortable kind of tossing that last race out. And if you do that, what you see is a horse that has gotten progressively better on turf at 5.5 furlongs, increasing speed numbers, won his race 2 races ago by 3 3/4 lengths, and posted a 76 Beyer speed figure. And if you figure there's going to be progression, then I wouldn't be surprised if he posts a 70-something, maybe even a low 80 Spire speed figure in this next race because he was going from a 50 to a 54 to a 67. He was on a really upward trajectory before that race at Colonial. And he's been running and working out quite well at Churchill since that race at Colonial. He's had some really good workouts. So I don't, he bounced back from that race particularly well. At 30-1, I obviously love the value. If you're playing on Stable Duel, that horse is only going to cost you $50. I think that's fantastic. So I just really like Big Boss Ben as a horse that I think is going to crash the party a little bit. And I think this horse has a lot of potential. And I just think that there's something there if you're willing to toss out that last race. And the fact that I know Colonial is a unique turf course that not everybody responds well to makes me feel more confident in tossing that last race. So how do I have the Indian Summer Stakes playing out? Well, at the top, at least I have some chalk. I do have To Win, Averly Jane. I just think too classy. To Place, Sunny is not so funny. I think there's a lot of speed there. And then To Show, I got my boy Big Boss Ben at 30-1. I think that horse hits the board. Really like it. All right, so let's move to the 9th race in the card, the Juddmonte Spinster Stakes, which is a Grade 1, again, win and you're in race for fillies and mares. And let's take a look at that field. This is only a 7-horse race. This is a 1.125 miles on dirt for 3-year-olds and up. Coming in at post position 1 is Dunbar Road, trained by Chad Brown and jockeyed by Flavian Pratt. Then Bonnie South, trained by Brad Cox and jockeyed by Florent Giroux. Town Avenger, trained by Brian Lynch, jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. And then the number 4 horse is Latruska, the morning line favorite, trained by Fausto Gutierrez and jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. Then Envudante, trained by Ken McPeak and jockeyed by Brian Hernandez Jr. Crystal Ball, Rudolph Brissett trained, Tyler Gaffalione jockeyed. And then finally High Regard, trained by Victoria Oliver and jockeyed by Rafael Bejarano. So, how do we see the Juddmonte Spinster Stakes playing out? Well, listen, last week, if you listen to the podcast, you know that I quoted one of my favorite professional wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair, when I was referring to Mo Forza. And I said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, listen, here at the Win Place Show, we are gender equal, and you don't have to be a man for that quote to apply to you. To be the woman, you got to beat the woman. And quite frankly, the woman is Latruska. This is as dominant a horse in the country within her division as there is, okay? Has won 5 of 6 races this year, 16 out of 21 in her career. Hello. This is a horse that has already won 3, count them 3, win and you're in Breeders' Cup races. That's right. She's going for a 4th. It is stunning to see how good this horse is. Now, this horse has one running style, which is get out on the lead. And her running style, in many ways, it's reminiscent of Nick's Go. It's reminiscent of a horse that I talked about yesterday, Blowout. I'm going to go in the lead. I'm going to run as fast as I can. If you can keep up with me, good to you. But I don't think you can. And this horse just goes out and runs and likes to be in the front. And Latruska is as sure a bet as there is. Now, the last time out, Latruska won the personal ensign up at Saratoga, but it was close. It was close. She had a bunch of horses breathing right down her neck at the end, including Bonnie South, who's going off at 9-2. And, if you're looking for a chink in the armor, so to speak, if you're looking for something to nitpick about Latruska, and it feels odd to say this, but it is interesting, and I think it's more fluky, but it's still interesting, is that when she is jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr., she barely wins. She often wins by less than a length and sometimes even less than a head. When she is jockeyed by Irad's brother, Jose Ortiz, she wins by 5-6 lengths. So it's interesting to see how, I don't know if she responds better to Jose than Irad. It's probably just a fluky coincidence and it has nothing to do with the two brothers. But again, if you're looking for a reason to go, well, maybe she's vulnerable this time out, well, that might be one of those reasons. Now, one of the other things to consider when you're thinking about this And maybe you look at this and go, maybe this is the time Bonnie South is able to catch up. First of all, Bonnie South is having a jockey change, gone from Manny Franco to Florent Giroux. And it's important to point out that both Bonnie South and Dunbar Road, who finished right there at the personal ensign as well and was really close to Latruska, both of those horses ran personal bests that day at the personal ensign. Latruska ran her normal race. She ran a 101 Beyer speed figure, and her last 4 races, she has posted a 102, 103, 102, 101 Beyer speed figure. So she's loping along like she always does. And it was the other horses. Bonnie South went from the previous race an 83 to a 101. Now, it should be pointed out 2 races ago, she ran a 99. So it's not as if that 83 was indicative of what she typically does. That was more of a down race. But still, that 101, personal best. Dunbar Road, previous 2 races had run an 86 and 88, then runs 100 at the personal ensign. Here's the question I ask you. Do you expect for both of those horses to post personal bests again? That's the calculus that you have to do. That's the question that's on hand. Are either of these horses going to bust out another personal best, or just remain consistent at 101, 100 or something like that? And maybe Latruska slips back to a 99 or something like that. Maybe she slips up a little bit. I don't know. That's a tough bet to make, because typically when horses do run a personal best, it's not indicative of a new trend. Usually there is a slight, it doesn't have to be a huge regression, but usually there is a slight regression the next time out. And I do worry about that. What I will say is Bonnie South has had some very crisp workouts since that personal ensign. If anybody's going to beat her, it's going to be her. But I'm not entirely convinced that I think Dunbar Road's going to fade a little bit. I think that was more of a wow type of performance from her. The other horse I'll mention is Envutante, who is a pretty consistent horse, has posted a few plus 100 Beyer speed figures, has just a tendency to hit the board against really good competition, may not always be in the mix, so to speak, sometimes can finish a little further back, but still hit the board. But again, this is a horse that runs up against big time competition all the time. Gone up against Latruska, has gone up against Bonnie South, has beaten Bonnie South before, has gone up against, She Dares the Devil, has gone up against another horse like Crystal Ball, who I actually don't like quite as much in this space. Ken McPeak has won this race before. I think he's a very good trainer, one that I have a lot of trust in. Brian Hernandez Jr. has been riding Envutante for the last 6-7 times out. So again, I trust the connections there. I think Envutante is a very good horse. At 6-1, I actually think it provides really good value to hit the board. The final horse that I will mention is Town Avenger, who's going off at 20-1. Town Avenger is making a huge step up in class, has been constantly improving, just moved from turf to dirt, and that move prompted her best speed figure to date. I think she'll probably get outclassed, but I would not be stunned if she finished 3rd or 4th among some of these other horses, especially if Dunbar Road I think is going to have a little bit of a step back. But the real question is just going to come down to, because we know what's going to happen in this race. Latruska is going to get out ahead. She's going to be in the lead, and Bonnie South and Envutante and Dunbar Road and Town Avenger and all these other horses are going to try to catch her. And good on them if they are able to. But to quote Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And in this case, the woman is Latruska. So to win, I have Latruska. To place, I have Bonnie South. And to show, I have Envutante. That's how I see the Juddmonte Spinster Stakes playing out. So let's move to the final win and you're in race on the card, which is the Castle and Key Bourbon Stakes, which is a grade 2 race for 2-year-olds on turf. And this is at 1 1/16. So let's take a look at that field for the Castle and Key Bourbon Stakes. And this is a large field. This is a 14-horse field. And I'll be honest, it could be up to 16. There's two other also eligible horses that we will not talk about. In all likelihood, they're going to be scratched. But like I said, it could expand up to 16. This is almost a Kentucky Derby size field. So in the number 1 hole, we have Brits Wit, trained by Andrew McKeever and jockeyed by David Flores. Stolen Base, trained by Mike Maker, jockeyed by Flavio and Pratt. Dowd Jack Chief, Tom Amos horse, jockeyed by James Graham. Right next to him is another Todd Amos horse, Martini and Moonshine, great name, jockeyed by Tyler Gaffalione. Coming at the 5 hole is Rocket One, trained by Bill Mott, jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. Credibility, Mark Cassie, Edwin Gonzalez. Then Fast and Steady, trained by Javier Gonzalez and jockeyed by Lionel Reyes. Wait a Minute Hayes, trained by Ricky Corville and jockeyed by Mitchell Merle. The number 9 hole, On Thin Ice, trained by Mark Cassie, jockeyed by Corey Lanier. In the number 10 spot, you have a pretty good horse. I like Red Danger, trained by Brian Lynch and jockeyed by Luis Saez. Then in the 11th hole, you have Heaven Street, trained by Steve Asmussen, jockeyed by Ricardo Santana Jr. Then the morning line favorite, Tis the Bomb, one of 2 Ken McPeek horses, jockeyed by Brian Hernandez Jr. And then Lucky Boss is the other Ken McPeek horse, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. And then finally, in the 14th hole, you have Play Action Pass, appropriate for a horse running on a Sunday, trained by Robert Medina and jockeyed by Edgar Zayas. So let's talk about this absolutely crowded field. And the first thing I'll say is, 14 horse fields, and not just 14 horse fields, but large fields, so much variability. So much can happen when you have a field this large. If a horse breaks a step slow, if this was a 6 or 7 or 8 horse field, not the end of the world. In a 14 horse field, your race could be over in the first 2 or 3 strides based on, maybe a slow start, based on getting pinched, based on getting shuffled back. So there's a lot of variability when you start talking about a 14 horse field. You increase that variability, I don't know, maybe tenfold when you add in the fact that these are 2-year-olds. So again, these are horses that are facing this level of competition for the first time. And for many of them are second, third, fourth, maybe 5th time out. So they're still facing a lot of challenges for the first time. So we'll see what ends up happening. However, there are a few horses that I do want to talk about that I think are in an upper tier and that should be considered for your wagers and should be considered if you're playing along at Stable Duel. Morning line favorite, Tis the Bomb, 3-1. I have to say, I think that's an appropriately priced morning line and horse. Has shown significant class, but will have to add some distance as this will be the longest trip to date. Has gone a mile the last 2 times out, obviously stepping up to a mile and a 16th. Not a huge ask there, seeing as the horse has been able to win with considerable class both those times out. Won a pretty big race at Kentucky Downs, the Juvenile Mile, $500,000 purse, and was able to win that over Kiss the Sky, who's another pretty good horse. Has had strong workouts since that race, good pedigree. You like the McPeek, Brian Hernandez combination there. So again, appropriately placed, that 12th post position, maybe not ideal, but not the end of the world. And so there's a lot to like there with Tis the Bomb, certainly. Now, I mentioned Red Danger was a horse that I like, and I do really like this horse, but I'm a little worried about this horse at a mile and a 16th. Red Danger is a horse that has only ever run at 6.5 furlongs. That's the longest it's ever run. It does have 2 races on turf, so the surface is preferred. I mean, this horse clearly likes turf over dirt. But again, at 6.5 furlongs, I'm just worried about stretching this horse out now to over a mile and a 16th. And I think the running style of the horse will work in its favor. This is not a horse that demands to be on the lead. This is a horse that can sit back. Now, again, in a 14-horse field, how much are you sitting back? How far are you getting shuffled back? Are you sitting in a stalking position at 3 or 4? Are you kind of at 7 or 8? How far back are you exactly? And that can obviously have an impact on how the race ends up playing out. So I'm a little worried about distance there with Red Danger at 7-2. I don't love the odds. Luis Saez, obviously, I trust a great deal as a jockey, but just a little worried that this is a horse that just might not be able to navigate all of the traffic at this distance. And at 7-2, I just don't love the odds there. Now, let's talk about a couple of other horses. And one of those is Martini and Moonshine. And Martini and Moonshine, I remember watching this horse win at Saratoga uh, the last time out. And most impressively, this horse has won at 1.1 miles. So this horse has done the distance at Saratoga on turf and won. And it won by getting to the lead and pulling away late. So it was a very classy victory. And, Tyler Gaffalione stays on this horse. It's 10-1. So you're getting really good odds. There are going to be other horses that are going to be pushing for the lead. Dowoziak Chief is one of them. And, who's breaking right next to Martini and Moonshine. So we'll see how the two of them end up playing out if one ends up sitting right off of the other. Does that wear one of them out? I'm not sure. So we'll see because they both have a front-running style. Although I will say when Dowoziak Chief goes up in distance, tends to adopt a little bit more of a stalking position running style, is more of a front runner at the sprint level. So we'll see. But Martini and Moonshine, like I said, at 10-1, I really do like those odds. I always do worry if horses are going to get worn out when you're going up against this level of competition at 1.1 miles, but I don't have any doubts that this horse can do the distance. I like the sire Malibu Moon, and certainly the dam also is from Unbridled Song. So there's a lot to like there from Martini and Moonshine. So I want to finish up by talking about two other horses, and we could talk about every horse to some extent, but I want to talk about the two 8-1 shots because I think there's something intriguing about both of them. And so one of them, and we'll start with the one that has the first post position, Rocket One, which is coming out of post 5. This is a horse that has run 1.1 miles, finished a very close third, came back, ran at a mile at Kentucky Downs and won that race. So this is a horse that I think can do the distance. Bill Mott trained. Again, trust Bill Mott a lot. Love the pedigree of this horse. Julien Leparoux, very capable hands as a jockey. And again, constantly improving speed numbers, 38, 52, 68. I mean, you're seeing pretty significant increases each time out from this horse. So if this horse makes another even modest increase, I think you would expect to see this horse end up maybe not in the winner's circle, but certainly on the board. Now, his fellow 8-1 long shot has a little bit better higher end speed, has been on turf the last 3 times out. Did not do well at 6.5 furlongs 2 races ago. Finished kind of a distance third. I think that speaks more to this horse maybe just not being a sprint horse. I think this horse really likes distance. This is a horse that when it steps up to longer distances does quite well. 7.5 furlongs on turf, victory. 1 mile on turf, victory. And so I do like Heaven Street quite a bit. I think at 8-1, you're getting really good odds. This is a Steve Asmussen horse jockeyed by Ricardo Santana Jr. That combination has won a whole lot of big races this summer at Saratoga. And I just have a feeling, and much like other Steve Asmussen horses I've talked about, this is going now to his 6th race. This horse seems to, a lot of his horses, especially the 2-year-olds, they just keep getting better the more they run. So I really like that. This is a horse that is, I think, going to be an improved horse. And so I like Heaven Sent quite a bit. So how do I see the Castle and Key Bourbon Stakes Grade 2 Win and You're In race playing out? Well, to win, I have Heaven Street. I like that 8-1 shot. I really like that horse quite a bit. I think with 2-year-olds, you never know how things are going to break out. I like the running style. Prefers to kind of be in a stalking position. So to win, I have Heaven Street. To place, I have Tiz the Bomb. Too good of a horse not to end up on the board. And then to show, I actually have the other 8-1 horse, Rocket One. Okay, well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this preview of the Sunday races at Keeneland. And remember to tune back on Monday morning, and you'll get the podcast for what I got right, what I got wrong, and lessons learned from the weekend. And to let you know, I know this is the last big weekend of When You're in races, but we have a lot of fun episodes planned between now and the Breeders' Cup in early November. So keep following us on your podcast platform of choice. Again, also, remember to download, rate, review, and share the Win Play Show with friends and your fellow horse racing fanatics, and subscribe to the Win Play Show on YouTube, in addition to following me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. And check out amalfimedia.com for all my picks for the entire Sunday Keeneland card and all the great horse racing content you need to get you through the Breeders' Cup and beyond. Well, until next time, friends, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.